Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend. A couple of days delayed as I was on a road trip to and from St. Louis, but I am now back home. And the big news, of course, from the weekend is that Uncharted is doing so much better than what many of the experts had said that the film would be doing. I mentioned saying after having seen the film, I could totally see there being a chance that with word-of-mouth campaigns going on from a generic audience perspective because of the general enjoyment of the film, that it could potentially be able to do a little bit better than what was projected. But of course, I was still also going along with what the actual projections for the weekend were, which were a lot less than this. And so my initial estimate was that the film would likely flop. That, of course, is no longer the case, at least at this point in time, based on how much the film has done better than what the projections were. We'll see how it exactly holds in its second weekend of release. As you all know, that second weekend is always incredibly key to determining whether or not a film will really have any long-term success or not. Before getting any further into these numbers and any other projections that might be here, and also, of course, from other films that are in their second week of release that we can finally make some projections on as far as whether or not they will make money, please make sure that you smash that like button, light that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time I do a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see, Uncharted soars to $51 million 4-day weekend as Dog, I always hate when they have these titles, Dog barks 18 plus million at President's Day box office. And so that $51 million is pretty impressive, especially since 44 million of that was made on the actual proper weekend. Remember, the Box Office Pro was projecting the film would only make about $30.7 million in its opening weekend, where Dog was only expected to make $9 million in the 3-day opening. And so both of those films actually did much better than expected, which could indicate that things are starting to move a little bit further in the direction of positive news towards the box office. But again, still a little too early to tell on that, as it was a holiday weekend. And of course, films like Uncharted are going to be able to bring out especially normie audiences because it's a generic action film, action adventure film, right? I mentioned that in my review saying, hey, I don't know really not much about the games because I've never played the games before, so whether or not it's living up to the games or not, that I will leave up to greater minds than mine who actually played this series and actually know the source material to be able to make commentary on it. But what I can say is that it is a fun, generic, turn-off-your-brain action-adventure film that I happened to like. I don't always like films like that. In this case, I happen to like it. And then you have a film like Dog, which has a dog in it. And one can only imagine why a film with a dog in it will be bringing people out to the theaters. I know that my hounds would have no idea why a film... See, there you go. River knows exactly what I'm talking about there. All right, so as we can see, though, Uncharted was projected to make that amount of money, but instead, it made $44 million, where Dog made around $14.9 million. Spider-Man No Way Home made $7.4 million, actually doing better than expected as well. Only a 2% drop from last weekend, which is insane. That's domestic total is now up to $770 million. Death on the Nile only made $6.5 million, which even though in its second weekend of release is only a 49% drop from its opening weekend, is still quite worrisome for that film because its opening weekend was not all that impressive. And so even though the drop is very strong, because the drop is from a number that was not all that high to begin with, it means that the film still has a long way to go and likely will not go all the way to be able to make its money back. And rounding out the top 5, we have Jackass Forever hanging on in its third week of release in the top 5 with another $5.2 million, $5.2 million, a 36% drop after losing around 500 screens as well. So this film, Jackass Forever, is still making money, is still making some profits. Looking at the individual releases, as we can see, Uncharted has made $139 million worldwide, and this is really the key number here as to why I'm thinking more and more, especially as we get closer to its second weekend numbers, why there is a much better chance for this film to be able to make its money back than before the weekend started. One, it, again, did much better in the domestic market than anyone was projecting, but two, it actually did a lot better in the international market as well, making $88 million in its opening frame. So with those numbers in mind, if we even just take into account a 50% drop in both areas, which again, it's going to be opening up in other territories. I know that there is unfortunately a China release Come on, Sony. You were doing so well. Anyway, so they are, again, having made a deal with the CCP, meaning that millions of dollars will go to fund their unhuman deals and their unhuman and dehumanizing programs. And again, I'm going to call out Sony and any studio that ever does any dealings with China from this point going forward. But again, that $88 million is without that release. And so with that in mind, the chance of this getting to $300 million by the end of its run is a lot more likely, as this film will probably cross easily the $200 million mark by the end of next weekend, probably somewhere ending between $200 and $250 million by the end of next weekend, if I had to make any guesses, meaning that this film is very likely to reach its break-even number and also make a little bit of extra profit to boot. But at what cost? Again, I bring up that China release. Dog, the new film, came out and again made $18 million domestically. Not really doing much as far as any other of markets. I, again, haven't followed the release of this film to know whether or not it's going to really have that much of a major presence in the international market. Doesn't seem like the type of movie that would appeal to international audiences, to be honest, because obviously American audiences, domestic audiences, we have very different relationships with our animals than they do in other countries. And so therefore, I would not see this film doing as well in those countries as it is doing here. Still doing quite well, $18 million, well over the amount of money that they expected this film to make in the 3 and 4 day opening weekend for the movie. So this film, costing only around $15 million to make, still has a little ways to go in order to make its money back, but still, it's on a pretty good track, and we'll be able to make some projections as far as whether or not the film will be successful or not by the end of next weekend. What we can say, though, is Death on the Nile, now in its second week of release, is likely to be another box office flop, as this film only made $76.1 million, only making $26.2 in the domestic market, $49.9 in the international market. Really not very good numbers there, and again, even though the drop domestically was kind of strong, only about a 50% drop in its second week of release. Again, that's not a terrible drop percentage-wise, because its initial opening weekend was really not all that strong to begin with. It does indicate that this film about Poirot very well could be the last film, at least in the Kenneth Branagh era. We'll, of course, have to wait and see exactly how much money it loses, and if they're able to make money back in any of the other areas like streaming or on physical media release, which, again, depending on how much money it loses, it could potentially do, but it's definitely not going to be nearly as successful as Murder on the Orient Express, which was a surprisingly good film. I enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express. Death on the Nile, not so much. The story is a giant mess. The acting was fantastic, but the story, oh my goodness, it was rough. Marry Me, which was a film made specifically for, or at least oriented and promoted and marketed for Valentine's Day weekend, hasn't done a whole lot since, but because it had a relatively low budget, it is likely to make a little bit of profit, but not really a whole lot. So probably will end around the break-even point. Blacklight, the newest film from Liam Neeson. Yes, Liam Neeson still making these action films, these generic action films. As you can see, they're going to need more men because Liam Neeson is on the prowl. It is not really doing a whole lot as far as the money is concerned, and this film actually did cost a little bit more than one might expect, and making only $7.8 million is not anywhere near the amount of money that this film needs to break even, so this film is likely to be another flop. Spider-Man No Way Home still making money, $1.8 billion. Good chance that this film, again, add another $30 million or so in the entire international market. So potentially could see this film get to the point of it getting to $1.9 billion. The question really is, how much further can this film go, especially as a physical media release is pretty imminent at this point. Jackass Forever, up to $58 million worldwide. Again, not doing anything really internationally, but because of its doing very well in the domestic marketplace, it is indeed making some money. It's a film that I still want to see, as, again, I grew up in this era of films, so this is a movie that I'd be very interested in actually checking out because, hey, I grew up with it. It was a part of my childhood, and even though I do think that there's some questionable... I know River's very disappointed in me. I know some people in the comment section are disappointed when I say that I was a fan of these films and these in the show growing up. But hey, again, it was kind of made for the era that I grew up in. Scream 5 has really made the money that it's going to make at this point. It's pretty much stalled, so it's not going to make a whole lot more. Basically, if you wanted to see this film and if anyone was interested in this film, you saw it within the first couple weeks, and since then, it really hasn't done much of anything. Moonfall, speaking of not doing much of anything, continues to not do much of anything at all. $29.5 million worldwide, and this film cost $165 million, and that's before marketing cost. You then have Licorice Pizza, which is an independent film that's gotten a lot of awards attention at $26.4 million, and Sing 2 Again, that little engine that could added another 30 million or so since last weekend, which is just insane. Again, $332 million worldwide for Sing 2. Again, you compare this movie to some of the other films this year that have been box office flops, and you think to yourself, yeah, it shows you that there are films that people are absolutely going to and willing to go out to go see. And it's again, when you use Omicron or when you use pandemic fear-mongering as an excuse for a film not doing well, it really just does not hold up to scrutiny, because there are several examples of films that have been able to make their money back, and some of them have actually had relatively high budgets as well. Sing 2 is just one of those examples, and it just goes to show that sometimes it depends on how much money you put into your films, how you market your films, and exactly what it is that audiences want to go see. I know, River. I know. Can't get through to her at all. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive into the box office charts, because, you know, we all like some charting, right? We all like to do some charting around here. I know that River especially likes to do some charting, as she and Willow are trying to fight for dominance, as it were. So as you can see, over the weekend of $139 million for Uncharted and $18 million for Dog. But we have the second weekend numbers now for the films Death on the Nile, Marry Me, and Blacklight. So we can make some projections based on these second week numbers for Death on the Nile. We can project that the film will make somewhere between $108 and $152 million. Marry Me will make somewhere between $52 and $73 million, whereas Blacklight will only make somewhere between $11 and $15 million by the end of its run. And obviously, there is a range there, and so it could fall beneath that minimum projection. It could fall above the maximum projection. In either case, it either would have to mean that the legs would fall off in the case of it doing worse than the minimum projection, and it would have to have incredibly strong legs, amazing legs, really, in order for it to get over the max projection, which can happen. But obviously, when it comes to some of these films and their budgets, even doing better than expected is not going to be enough to actually break even. And again, a lot of that's because of these budgets. So starting off with the films in its second week of release, because Death on the Nile cost $90 million to make. That means its break-even number is $225 million, and just not likely to get to that number at this point in time. And so because of the $76 million it has made thus far, this movie is expected to lose somewhere between $69.7 and $43.6, so about $70 and $44 million. The film is expected to lose somewhere along those lines. Marry Me, because of its break-even point being $57.5, having a much smaller budget, is therefore expected to lose either $3 million or make $9. So that means that the most likely scenario is that this film will indeed break even and make maybe a small amount of profit to boot, which I imagine they are going to be perfectly happy with, because, again, it was a film made for one weekend, and it did well enough in that weekend, and it cost just little enough. Again, who would have thought Owen Wilson and J-Lo? Yes, seriously. That combination still gets me. Blacklight cost, again, a little bit more than what some people may have expected. Again, it costs around $43 million, making its break-even number is around $107.5 million. This film, because it's not doing much of anything, is expected to lose somewhere between $57 and $55 million by the end of its run. Moonfall, as I mentioned before, because of the fact that it's really, again, still not made much of anything at all, is still around $200 million in the red, and likely will not get that much further along in that process. Death on the Nile, right now sitting at $89.3 million with the amount of money it's made. So again, this film will likely, lose money based on those numbers. Dog is, again, doing better than expected. So right now it's sitting at around $11.6 million. So it could very well make its money back. It's still going to have to make a little bit of, it's still going to have to do a little bit, in the domestic market, because it really only has the domestic market to play around with at this point, but it still has to make a little bit more money to get to that break-even point, but it's definitely possible. Whereas Uncharted at $139 million is only $96.6 million in the red after its opening weekend, which means that by the end of next weekend, it'll probably be closer to 30 to 40 million and could very well be on its way to breaking even and even making a little bit of extra profits. Jackass Forever is at $19.8 million in net profits. Scream 5 has made $36.8 million in net gain profits. The 355, which is now available for free on streaming, is at $101.7 million in losses, not doing much of anything at all. And we have some of the other films that we were tracking. And again, Sing 2 at $72.2 million in net gain profits. So again, when people try and make excuses, when people try and bring up different things to say, hey, here's why this film did bad, it's because of the fear-mongering, It's like, don't get me wrong, I think the fear-mongering has definitely impacted the movie-going habits of a lot of people, but people are still willing to brave the odds, as it were, to go see films and to even provide mass profits for those films in certain cases. Again, based on their budgets and based on how well they're able to market themselves, we see these examples. Again, Spider-Man No Way Home has made almost $800 million in net gain profits. So that's after you take into account marketing costs. That's after you subtract the budget from it. Again, $800 million, almost $1 billion in just net gains is pretty impressive. And so anyway, those are the box office numbers for this weekend. What are y'all's thoughts? Have you seen Uncharted? If you did, were you as surprised as I were? Again, I found it somewhat entertaining. Definitely did not think it was the best film in the world. It's definitely not a film that I plan to buy in physical media, but hey, I had a good time with it. Again, it reminded me a little bit of National Treasure in the way it played about, right? The mystery of trying to unlock, the keys and, where do the keys go and where does the next thing happen? Again, I like that kind of stuff, right? It has kind of that Goonies, adventure, mystery to it. And it also has, of course, this element. It's probably closer to National Treasure than Goonies because, again, it's not a kids movie. But still, I think that it was a film that surprised me a lot. And so I imagine that that's probably why the film is doing as well as it is that it's appealing enough to general audiences and bring out enough general audiences for it to be in contention to make its money back. Have you seen the film Dog? Again, it's a film that I'm definitely interested in going to check out. But have you seen it? If you have, what are your thoughts about that? And also, what are your thoughts about any other films in their second week of release? Do you think Death on the Nile is going to be able to squeeze out some money? It doesn't seem likely, but hey, you never know. Marry Me and Blacklight, do you think that those films are going to do as well as projected? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, lap that fire button. If you're watching over on Odyssey, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my Patreon Subscribestar and Locals members, starting off with Patreon animation commentator Brandon, let's go Brandon, Brian P, Christopher Bowman, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you Father, Father Damian Cook, Fuzz Aldrin, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Hymir Ari Hymason, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, The Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ellen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, or Miss Martin Muses, Theodore Benden, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. Also to my Subscribestar peeps, UAB Mad Dog, which is Mr. Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stand 4, John B, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. And also a huge shout out to the newest members over on Subscribestar, TL John, Trent Johnson, and Matt317. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on the Subscribestar platform. And to my 3 local supporters, we got Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, which is once again Mike Jackson, super supporter over there, and Robert Barnes. Thank you very much for supporting me over on the Locals platform. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please think about signing up on either of those platforms. You can find a link in the description below that will lead you to all of those different pages. It is known as the Willow link, as it is w.lo link, and it will have all of the links to that, to the Discord channel, to all different kinds of places, including places to support me as well. At the Citizen of Asgardian level, you get Citizen of Asgardian level is how it's labeled on Patreon. Still need to fix that, but Citizen of Asgard level, you get a shout out at the end of every live stream and video. If you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also access to a giveaways channel, which is featured on the Discord that I have. I know, River, it is very exciting. It is so exciting, where you get giveaways for things like 4K titles, Steelbook titles, etc. Again, I got some 4K Steelbooks of The Punisher, for instance. I've got 4Ks of tons of other movies, so I'm giving those away all the time. So if that sounds interesting to you, join the Army of Asgard level. Also, at the Keep of the Bifrost level, you get all of that stuff, plus you get access to a once a month and maybe twice a month. We're trying to add an extra podcast in there of me and John the Flickinger, where we talk about movies, and also you get to ask your questions. Any questions that you want to ask, you get to ask with that podcast. And then you have the Chosen of Valhalla level, which gives you access to all of those, and also a once-a-month podcast where you get to be featured with me on the main channel. We all get to talk together about movies, culture, pop culture, anything really that the Chosen want to talk about, or anything the Chosen wants to promote is on the table. So if you like that, join at the Chosen of Valhalla level. Also, during your first month of support, you get a free t-shirt. Any t-shirt that you want from the main store, you get access to, and I do ship internationally anywhere in the world. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.